Good morning, everyone. We are up to Perikid Aleph, Mishna Yud, chapter 11, Mishna 10, and actually today we will be completing Masech Truma. Every time we finish a whole Masech, it's really it's a very interesting feeling if you complete this whole subject and going through all the different topics and Mishnayos that are covered. It's a fascinating journey. Okay, Mishnah Yud. Madlikin shemen tzreifa b'bate knesiyos b'bate midrashos b'muvayis ha'afelin. We can light oil that is burned. Oil that is burned is how we refer to oil of truma that became impure. Because it's impure, it cannot be consumed by a company. He's not allowed to consume it, but he's allowed to use it for fuel. So therefore, it's always called shemen tzreifa, oil that's to be burned. That's the term that's used to describe olive oil that has become tummy, become impure. Now, we know, as I mentioned before, I just mentioned that the Kohen can use it for using it for fuel to burn. But here the Mishnah tells us very interestingly that madlikin shemen tzreifa, we can light using shemen tzreifa, we can kindle lights, but the knesiyos in synagogues, midrashos, and in study halls, and in dark alleyways. Basically, we can use it for public uses. The question is, well, does there have to be a Kohen there? It doesn't sound like it. There doesn't have to be a Kohen there. And nonetheless, we're allowed to go ahead and use that oil of truma that became impure to use it for fuel, even not used by a Kohen. How can that be? A non-Kohen, not only we know that he can't eat truma, we know that he can't use truma in a way that consumes it, that uses it up. No, he can't benefit from truma in a manner that basically destroys or uses up the truma, which burning oil would definitely be. So how are we allowing this public usage of the impure truma olive oil in shuls and in batei medrash and synagogues and study halls and in alleyways? How can we do that? So the explanation that's given is that essentially this whole idea that a non-Kohen cannot use truma in a way that consumes it is rabbinic in nature. It's midrabanan. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat it. According to Torah law, a non-Kohen can benefit from truma in any manner. The sages said if it's a benefit that actually consumes and uses up the truma, then not, because that's already similar to eating. And therefore, as a precautionary measure, they said no using it no benefiting from it when you use it up. But that's rabbinic in nature. And when the sages instituted that law, they did not include public usage of truma oil, or at least truma oil that's impure. And therefore, to use it for a public use in a study hall, in a synagogue, in an alleyway, for people to be able to light up the dark alleyway, that the sages never included in their prohibition, and they allowed truma that is impure. That again, if a truma is not impure, you can't. Well, if the truma that they allowed truma that's impure that could only be used for burning, that they allowed for public usage. The next case the Mishnah says is valgabe hachoilin. You can use truma oil to light candles to take care of the sick. There's someone that's ill, and you need to light up the room in order to take care of them. Here too, we say you're allowed to use truma oil bershus kohen, in the presence of a kohen. If a kohen is there also, so he's benefiting from it also, then you can use it also. So we have a case. You have a group of people visiting the sick person. He needs to be taken care of. If someone present there is a kohen, so the kohen is benefiting from that light that's being fueled by the truma oil. And therefore, we say a candle for one is like a candle for 100. Once he's using it, it's not like they use it more because they're also using it. And therefore, once the Kohen is benefiting from it, they can all use it. Here, because it's for the need of an individual, it's not needed for a public, therefore, the Chachamim did not allow it to be used by a non-Kohen, the truma that's impure, because again, it's a usage, it's a benefit that uses up the oil. Therefore, the Chachamim, the sages, did not allow you to use that, unless if the Kohen present. Once there's a Kohen present, then already, if the Kohen's benefiting from it, there's no problem anyone else benefiting along with him. Now, this is, and what's important to point out, that the Yad Avram points out, is that if you need this light because this sick person is in danger, his life's in danger, and you need the light to take care of him, you need to give him a life sustained, he's in danger of losing his life, and what you need to help him with is something that's going to preserve his life. We're talking about a danger to life situation. That's why you need the light in order to preserve his life. Then already you don't need a Kohen there. We say pekuach nefesh deicha kol haTorah. If it's danger to life, it supersedes any laws of the Torah, and therefore, again, there are exceptions, but the general rule is that if there's a danger to life, to save a life, you could even transgress prohibitions of the Torah, and therefore, if we're talking about a situation where the care he needs is to preserve life, so therefore, you can take any oil that you need as soon as possible to be able to do that, and that includes the truma, the impure truma oil also. Next case. Bas Yisrael shenisas l'kohen, the daughter of a Yisrael, she's the daughter of a non-Kohen, who married a Kohen. Now that she married a Kohen, she has all benefits of truma. All benefits of the Kohen go to the wife of a Kohen. She can eat truma. She can burn the oil of truma. She can burn the impure oil of truma. So what's happening here is, so she's married to a Kohen. V'hi lamuda eitzel aviyah, and she's accustomed to be by her father. Aviyah matlik b'rshusa. The father can light the impure truma oil while she's there. So he's there, she's there. They're both going to benefit from the oil. Being that she has permission to benefit from the oil, once she's benefiting, he can benefit. And therefore, if he, for some reason, has this truma oil that's impure, maybe she brought it along, or she left it there at a different time, he would be able to light it on her behalf. Now, the question is, we just learned a halacha about the sick person, that if the Kohen's in the presence of the sick person, you can light the candle to be able to take care of him, even if others are benefiting. So what's exactly the novel teaching of this case? It's a repetition. It's literally a repetition. It's the same kind of case. If a Kohen or someone who is permitted to benefit from truma, if you're lighting the candle in their presence, once they're benefiting, you can benefit also because it doesn't take away more usage of the candle. So what exactly is the novel? Why are we just repeating this halacha here? So the Yad Avram brings down from the Aruch HaShulchan an interesting explanation, and that is that, as the Mishna mentioned, he lamuda eitzel aviyah, she's accustomed to be there, which means, according to the Aruch HaShulchan, that she's accustomed to be there. The father knows what time she's going to show up, and therefore he's allowed to light the candle for her when she comes, even before she comes. He can light the candle even before she comes, since she is going to come and she's going to benefit from it. And therefore, he's permitted to benefit from it. Not only that, he could actually start benefiting even before she comes. That's a very interesting idea. That even before she actually comes, she's benefiting, being that typically when she's going to come, it's enough to light the candle around that time. Even before she actually walks into the door, when she's going to come, typically when she's going to come, you can go ahead and light that candle because she's shortly going to arrive, or you expect, she's about to arrive. You light the candle. We shouldn't walk through the door yet, but you know what you expect when she's going to arrive. So right before that, you can go ahead and light the candle even before she is there. So it comes out for a short period of time. Perhaps he will be benefiting before she comes, but since you're doing it for her, and she's coming shortly, and you assume she's coming shortly, we say you can do that. And we don't say, well, maybe she's not going to show up today. She said she's going to come. Maybe she's not going to show up. And you can't take that chance and light it because when she's coming. Maybe she's not going to show up today. Maybe she's going to be late. The Mishnah says that, the Aruch HaShulchan says, the point of the Mishnah is that being that she is lemuda etzloi, she's accustomed to come to him, he knows when she's coming, he can assume that she is showing up at the time that she comes, light the candle shut before she comes, and not have to be concerned maybe she's not going to show up. So that's how he learns the novel teaching of this part of the Mishnah. Next, Madlikin beveis hamishta, avaloi beveis ha'aval. You can use oil truma, impure oil truma, to light a beis hamishta, a place where a banquet is taking place. Very often this term is used for a wedding. Avaloi beveis ha'aval, but you can't light it in a mourner's house. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, these are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, to start with, it must be that there's a Kohen present either at this wedding or at this Shiva house, at this house of mourning, because it's not a public use. It's more that's considered. These are private uses, and therefore the Kohen is present. Well, if the Kohen's present, then why should we say you can use it at a wedding, but you can't use it at a mourner's house? And the explanation by the Bartanura is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, we are concerned in the mourner's house that perhaps, there's one room that the Kohen is in, and somebody may come and take one of the candles that are being used, one of the lamps that are being used with the truma oil, that where the Kohen is, and take it out from where the Kohen is and take it to a room where the Kohen is not. When we're afraid someone's going to transfer this lamp that's burning with truma oil into a different place where the Kohen is not, and in that room, no one is going to be benefiting. Everyone is going to be benefiting without the Kohen, and that wouldn't be permissible. So although essentially to go ahead and light in the house if the Kohen is there should be permissible, but Rabbi Yehuda says you can't light in the mourner's house because we're afraid that someone's going to take it out from that room, or take one of the lamps out of that room that's being used with the truma oil and take it to a different room where the Kohen isn't. Now, that only seems to be a concern of Rabbi Yehuda in the house of a mourner, not at a wedding. Why? So the answer is because by a wedding, everybody's dressed nicely, and no one's going to go moving the lamps because it was something that you can dirty yourself with. The oil's going to spill over and spill on your clothing. And Rabbi Yehuda says people aren't going to move the lamps at a wedding so as not to dirty themselves. So therefore, he says, if the Kohen is at the wedding, you can light again at the wedding in the room where the Kohen is, and not be concerned that it's going to be moved to a different room because people wouldn't do that so as not to soil their clothing. But in the house of a mourner, no one's wearing special clothing, and therefore they're not concerned whether they soil their clothing or not with some of the oil that spills on them. And therefore, there we're concerned that somebody may move it out of the room where the Kohen is into a different room where the Kohen is not, and therefore we don't light at the house of a mourner. Rabbi Yosi says, you could light in a mourner's house, but not at the wedding. Rabbi Yosi takes an opposite view. His view is that in the house of a mourner, there's no reason to be moving on lamps. Everybody is somber. Everybody's focused where they're focused. There's no reason to think someone's going to move the light from one room to another room. But at a wedding, at a very festive occasion where people are in different places and they're celebrating, there we are concerned that someone's going to take a lamp or one of the lamps from one room and take it to another room where the Kohen is not. Therefore, Rabbi Yosi says at a wedding, there's no lighting, there's no using the oil that's tamei. Rabbi Meir Oiser Kan V'Kan. Rabbi Meir says both places you can't light, because Rabbi Meir basically takes the stringent view of both of them. Rabbi Meir says you can't do it at a wedding because since it's a celebratory mood, people are moving around candles. You can't use it in a house of a mourner because the clothing, the fact that it's somber is not a reason that someone's not going to move the candle, and they're not wearing nice clothing anyway, and therefore they won't be concerned about getting dirty by moving it. Rabbi Shimon Mater Kan V'Kan. Rabbi Shimon says in both places it's permissible. He follows both lenient arguments, and that is in a wedding place they're not going to move the candles because they don't want to soil their clothing. In the house of the mourner, they're not going to move the candles because that makes something before. Rabbi Yosi forbade before in both places, by the wedding because it's celebratory, and by the mourner's house, right, because they're not afraid of getting their clothing dirty. Rabbi Shimon Matre Kan V'Kan. Shimon permits in both places. He takes both arguments, the lenient arguments. At the wedding, they don't want to dirty their clothing. At the mourner's house, no one's in the kind of state of mind to go moving candles from one room to another room, and therefore he permits in both places. So according to Rabbi Shimon, you can use the oil that's tamei, that can be used for fuel in the presence of a Kohen if the Kohen is there at the wedding or at the mourner's house. And the Bartanura says the halacha is like Reb Shimon. So therefore, we can be lenient in both places. So basically, just to sum up the Mishnah, for a public use, like in a synagogue, in a study hall, okay, Trumas, we've now completed the Trumas, Tractate Trumas. Tomorrow, we will start Maseches Maasros, Tractate of the deals with the laws of tithes. That's Tithes. Mitzvahs aseh l'svados lifnei Hashem achar shemoitzian kol hamatana shebezeru haaretz. A positive commandment. To literally translate this means to say a confession. They translate it here as an avowal, before God. After taking out, after dispensing all the gifts of the grain or the produce of the land. So we'll explain what this means. Shana, as the pasuk states, when you complete tithing, all the tithes of your grain of the third year, the year of the tithing, you shall give it to the Levite, to the stranger, to the meaning a convert, to a orphan, to a widow. You should then say or declare before Hashem your God, I have removed the holy food from my. So we'll explain what this all means. But basically, in the third year, you're supposed to be dispensing of all the gifts that you were supposed to have done until now. And once you have taken care of it, you make a declaration and say to Hashem, I have done so. I have removed all holy food from my property. When is this declaration made? The mincha, it is made at mincha time, at the time of the afternoon prayers. The Yom Tov Achron Shal Pesach, on the last day, on the last day of the holiday of Pesach. Pesach in Torah is 7 days. So we're talking the last day of Pesach, the last Yom Tov day of Pesach is the 7th day of Pesach, Shvi Shal Pesach. So this confession is made mincha time on the last day of the Yom Tov of Pesach, on the 7th day of Pesach. Bashana Revius L'Shmita B'Shvius, in the 4th year of the Shemitah cycle and the Shemitah year. Okay. So now, if you recall, as we said, you have 6 years preceding the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year is when the land is up fallow. There is no separation of Trumas and Maasros for what grows in that year. What grows in all 6 years? There are separations that have to be made. In all 6 years, you've got to take the first from your new grain. You take off a portion that goes to the Kohen. During all 6 years, after you've taken off the truma from what's left over, you take a tenth that goes to the Levi. And the Levi is going to take a tenth of his tenth and give it to the Kohen and give it to a Kohen. Now, if we're talking about the, Now, for what's left over in the first and second years, the second tithing, called Meiser Sheni, is sanctified food. That sanctified food has to be eaten in Yerushalayim or redeemed unto money, and the money is spent in Yerushalayim. That happens on the first and second years, and the fourth and the fifth years. In the third and the sixth years, the second tithing actually goes to the poor instead of becoming sanctified, and you eat it in Yerushalayim or redeem it. So now what happens is that, it doesn't always happen that you're able to separate during the first year or the second year or the third year. But that there's a certain point of time, or the same thing, we talk about the fourth and the fifth and the sixth year. At some point, you got to do it. At some point, you've got to make sure that you separate and distribute what has to be taken care of. And basically, it has to be done by the last day of Pesach in the 4th and 7 years. That is your taking care of all that has to be done in the previous 3 years. It ends basically in the fourth year. Okay, it ends in the fourth year, the seventh year. So now, what is this person? So, and what is this person going to do? So, Keitzad hu oiseh. Keitzad hu oiseh. What does a person do? He separates all the gifts from his fruits. If what he has left by him that he still has to distribute is truma and trumas meiser from the meiser that he was supposed to give, but don't forget, this all has to be done. There's a deadline for this. The deadline is the last day of Pesach of the fourth and seventh year. So if he has truma and trumas meiser by him, meiser l'kayin, gives it to the kayin. Meiser rishon, if he has meiser rishon that he has to still distribute, meiser levi, gives it to a levi. Meiser ani, if he has the time to go to the poor, meiser ani, he gives it to the poor. Nisharu etzloi peiros meiser sheneter ravai. Now let's say what he has left over by him are meiser sheni fruits, or neta ravai, which we learned about yesterday, fourth year fruits that are also sanctified and have to be in Yerushalayim. Or the money that he used to redeem them, but he didn't take it to Yerushalayim. After the deadline, he has to destroy them, burn them, throw them into the sea. He has to destroy them by either throwing them into the sea or by burning them. So basically, if you don't make those in time, you got to destroy it. You're supposed to go ahead and give out these gifts by the deadline. If you missed the deadline to give it to these people, you still give it to them. You just make sure at least that separated it by the deadline. Now, according to most opinions, this declaration for the separating of everything only applies in the times of the Beis HaMikdash. The halacha is that if you basically transgressed one detail of the laws of that deal with truma and meiser, you can't do that. They can't make the declaration anymore. The declaration doesn't include the fact only that you separated it, but that you treated it properly. So if you transgress the detail of the laws of trumas and meiseris, you cannot make this declaration. Therefore, that's another reason. We're not sure if we didn't transgress over the years that we were supposed to be taking care of this. Therefore, nowadays, we don't make the vidui. Nonetheless, you got to separate those gifts and remove them and take care of them, as has been explained. Now, again, nowadays we don't give the truma to the Kohen. We don't give the Levi. The Levi the mice doesn't go to the Levi necessarily. It doesn't go to the Levi, but at the same time, you have to deal with them nowadays as you would deal with them, and make sure that's done by these times. But you got to make sure that it's taken care of and removed, from your house on the last day of Pesach. So again, the main point is that by the last day of Pesach, all these things that have to be separated and taken care of have to be done and removed from your house. That's the point of beer. It cannot remain in your domain. It's got to be removed from your domain on that day, and whatever is around has to be dealt with. When it's appropriate to distribute to the Kohanim, to the Leviim, that's when it's done. We're talking about Meiser Sheni or Neta Ravai, as mentioned before. Once it passes by, once these deadlines pass by, you have to destroy it. And nowadays, you have to deal with the Trim and the Meiser as they do now in Eretz Yisrael. But the point is, it's got to be separated and moved from your house by these times, by the last day of Pesach of the fourth year and the seventh year. There are those who say this has to be done not by the last day of Pesach, but by the first day of Pesach. This applies both by men and by women. Have a wonderful day.